to session number 5, and we'll give people about another minute to continue joining us. And congratulations, because you've all made it to session 5. This is our second to last workshop presentation for the iTree Academy this year, or for 2025. And we've been really glad to have you join us. All right, so I think we can go ahead and get started. So again, hello. This session is session 5 is in many ways what we call the main event. We've looked at the different ways that you can take a look at tree benefits using the wide array of online iTree tools. And this week we're going to focus on iTree Eco, which is really the flagship and the keystone tool in our suite. It offers a more comprehensive look with respect to inventories and analysis of your canopy. And we're going to look at the ways that you can put those together. Eco involves part of what we've been talking about as it's going to ask you for more and it's going to give you some more. So it involves a differently and more detailed configuration. In return, it's going to offer you a much richer set of information in return. So some quick logistical reminders again for today. All of the information that we've been providing for any of the sessions are all now available online, including the recordings of each session for 1 through 4. All of the information from today will be up there before today is over as well. Again, remember that there are exercises available that can give you an opportunity to work on what we've talked about today. And you can revisit any of the other tools and their respective activities at your leisure as well. So again, those are available for each date of each session within that website. But today we're going to ask everybody again to utilize that chat window in our meeting for questions. We try to answer as many of them as we can in real time. And as always, we will stick around for about 10 or 15 minutes following today's session to give everybody an opportunity to ask us something that either we didn't get to, or if you have a highly particular problem or question about a project that you're considering. And again, we know that folks have been checking in with us about the availability of CEUs and CFEs for these sessions. They're available for any live session that you attend, but we will be making those available as the Academy closes. So after we've completed all sessions, we'll be able to get those back to you. And always, you can contact us with any of your questions about any of the tools at info@itreetools.org. So just to sort of bring us up to speed, again, we're going to take a look at iTree Eco today, which is our most robust tool in terms of looking at canopy benefits. Next week, what we're going to do is come back with a final session that tries to highlight the ways that you can put this information to work for your particular needs or your project in your location. And sometimes that can look like different ways of communicating your results. Sometimes it can look like different ways to explain and identify which results are meaningful to your particular task, whether you're talking to policyholders, whether you're thinking about management looking ahead, or whether or not you're looking to evolve some of your tree and landscape work, with respect to the tree work that you do where you are. So we wanted to remind everybody that following next week's session on Wednesday, we will the following day be offering our regularly scheduled open office hours. And what that means is that the iTree team is going to hang out for about for an hour at a link that you can find right on our homepage. And I'll send another reminder out to anybody who has registered for the Academy so far. But it is totally open and it sort of works like first come, first serve. But if you want to touch base with us ahead of time about a question, you could do that as well. But everyone is welcome, and rest assured it will not be the last time that we do that. We offer them every month. Actually every second Thursday of the month. And again, you can find that information and grab a calendar invite right from our website. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Jason, who's going to remind us a little bit about what we've talked about so far and how eco plays the foundational role in driving a lot of the tools that we've already talked about, but the ways that eco can really get to the heart of what you might be looking for with your canopy. All you, Jason.
Perfect. Thanks, Krista. Yeah, thanks everybody for coming back. This is really our time to really get into the nuts and bolts of our biggest tool, our flagship tool, iTree Eco. So just kind of our broad outline of the plan for today. There's really a lot going on in Eco, so we won't be able to get to everything that's in there, but we hope to get you to a point where you can decide at least if iTree Eco is right for you. So I'll spend a little time talking about some kind of key decision points in setting up an iTree Eco project. We'll go through setting up an Eco project and getting some data in there. We won't really have time to dig into the results, what we have here, but Anna will come back in and talk a little bit about what you can see in the results and also how to make that kind of final decision if iTree Eco is the right tool for you. It's definitely more of a commitment. When we do like an iTree Eco training, if we've done an in-person one, typically they're 2 full days. So there's a lot more involved in iTree Eco than some of the easier to use tools that we've covered so far. But we're going to give you a peek under the hood and hopefully you can then decide if iTree Eco will help you in the work you do. So just to kind of, again, reorient us to where we are and where we've been. Hopefully you remember that iTree Eco is our flagship tool. It's where all the latest science goes first. But all of those results, all that science that's in iTree Eco makes it down into all the other tools, all the online tools that we've already covered, those individual tree tools like MyTree, iTree Planting, and iTree Design, our top-down tools in Canopy and Landscape, and that one click to tree canopy cover information of our trees. So everything starts with iTree Eco, so that's why we're covering it here last, so you can sort of see where how that leads into everything else we do. But there is a whole lot more in Eco. There's a whole lot more kind of granularity and detail that you can provide, and there's a whole lot more that you can get out of it. So hopefully we can introduce you to some of that today. Just like in the other tools, we go with this structure, function, value framework for how the tools work, but the structure in Eco, there's a lot more to provide. So you might remember the other tools, typically you just provide DBH and species. When we start to do iTree Eco, there's a lot more information you can provide, and then you get a whole lot more out of it as far as summary of all the different field measurements you've provided. You'll get a summary of the amount of leaf area on every single one of your trees and how that scales up to your community. That's really important for driving those ecosystem services, things like the condition of your trees. We will summarize those and output those in Eco. Things like a species distribution. So what are your most common species? Do you have too many of that species? It can really help to make those kind of informed decisions about what species you might want to put on the landscape later. And things like a diameter distribution. So do you have a lot of small trees and relatively few large trees, or do you have a lot of large trees and not a lot of small trees there that are going to replace them? So there's a whole lot more information and detail that we can get out of iTree Eco just about the structure. So then we can also go to the function. That's where we start to talk about ecosystem services. So underlined there, we have our 4 core ecosystem services we've talked about with all the other tools, those air quality improvements, energy effects, carbon benefits, and hydrology effects. But Eco actually has a bunch more than that. It is things like shade and ultraviolet effects. So we can essentially estimate an SPF factor for the shade that trees provide in your community. Foodscape characteristics. Do the trees in your community provide food for people or animals nearby? Is there suitable habitat provided by the trees that you have in your community? Do your trees emit volatile organic compounds? So this is actually a disservice that trees provide. But it's in iTree Eco because we're trying to get down to that more detailed, more granularity in those outputs so that we can make better decisions about the trees in our landscapes. And even getting to things like how much nutrients are in the leaves the trees are losing, how much wood could those trees provide, and a whole bunch more. And lastly, we put a monetary value on that, or a value on that. So we'll put a monetary value on those core ecosystem services. We'll put a monetary value on the replacement value of those trees. And again, this will be for each individual tree or scaled up to your whole community. When we start to talk about things like health outcomes in iTree Eco, we'll actually drill down to individual health outcomes like reducing asthma exacerbations. How many incidences are we reducing? Lost work days or lost school days? How many actual lost school days are we reducing? So there's a lot more detail we can get into with all of those. iTreeEco will actually do a cost benefit analysis. So if you know how much money you put into your community's shade tree program, whether it's street tree planting or maintaining those trees, or even if you want to talk about something like leaf pickup, you can put all those costs into iTreeEco and it'll estimate sort of a return on investment. How many dollars do you get back in tree benefits for each dollar spent on your trees? And then finally, you can get to management action. So how do you manage your trees to maximize ecosystem services? So again, there's just a whole lot more in iTreeEco, still under this kind of same framework we've talked about throughout the whole academy for the iTree tools. There are a few key decision points. I'll try and hit on these as we go through and talk about eco, but the first one here is to decide what data you're going to collect for your project. In all the other tools, it was pretty prescribed. There was data that you had to collect. You had to do at least tree species and DBH. If you wanted those energy effects, you needed distance and direction to building, things like that. Well, in iTreeEco, there's a whole lot more. So you have to do at least tree species and DBH. That's the same across all the tools. There's a whole lot more in iTreeEco. iTreeEco is really driven by that leaf surface area. So we want a whole bunch of measurements about the size of your tree's crown. We want information about the health of that tree, how much light that tree is getting, and even the land use that the tree is on. That'll all impact the ecosystem services. But beyond those ecosystem services, there are even things you can collect around, is your tree a street tree or not? Is your tree require some sort of maintenance? Maybe it needs to be pruned, or maybe it needs to be staked so it grows a little straighter. So you can collect all sorts of information like that in iTreeEco. So there's just a whole lot more you can do, and there's a whole lot of flexibility. You can do some of these, or all of these, or none of these, just that tree species and DBH. It's totally up to you and the goals of your project. So that's one of the key decision points you have to make first before you even start measuring any trees. You will have to put into iTreeEco exactly which data you're going to provide. But we have some things that can help. So we've talked about our understanding iTree document before. You can go back to that document. There's this table in there, and it actually tells you how much, or how each one of those inputs, so this is species and DBH, total height, how they affect the ecosystem services and the outputs that you're going to get out of the tool. So if you're really interested in leaf area, you need to do species and DBH, but you can skip something like crown light exposure. So if you just don't want to collect that, but you're interested in that leaf area, that's fine, because crown light exposure doesn't impact that variable. So this information can really help you decide which data you may want to collect for your project. And then the second key decision point that you're going to come up to is whether you're going to do a complete inventory or a sample. So a complete inventory, we're going to measure all the trees that we're interested in. And in a sample, we're going to put random plots throughout our community of interest, and we're just going to measure the trees in each one of those random plots. So that's going to be a statistical sample. And from those random plots, we'll be able to scale up our estimates to the whole city. So these are two different approaches. They have really different applications a lot of times, and they can have different uses. So we'll talk a little bit about what these are, but most of the time, if you're going to do those sample plots, you're doing that because it's too hard to measure the whole thing. Where in the case of a complete inventory, you know all the trees that you're interested in, and you're going to go to those trees and you're going to measure every single one. So they're really different approaches. For that sample, why would you do it? Well, what we're really doing, it's just like when we do something like a survey. If you wanted to do an opinion survey, you're going to find you're going to call random 1,000 phone numbers, and you're going to ask those people their opinion and apply that percentage to the whole population that you were trying to estimate. It's the same with what we're trying to do with an iTreeEco sample project. We're going to put these random plots all throughout the community, and we're going to measure the trees within each plot, and then we can then scale that up to the whole city or whole community we're interested in. And really the decision here is always, is it easier to measure these plots than it is to measure all the trees, the whole tree population we're interested in? The key thing here is it has to be a random selection of plots. iTreeEco will actually help you do this, create a random assortment of plots for you. But if you don't do that random assortment, the statistics and the calculations within ECO are going to be wrong for your plot-based project. So that's a really important point if you decide to do a plot-based project. And we can actually put standard errors to these. So we'll have a guess at how accurately our sample represents the whole population. So this is how places like London, and that's what this map is on the right, they did an iTreeEco project. They have their inner London and outer London, and these are all their plots that they used. This is how they measure and decide that there are 8.5 million trees in the city. They didn't have somebody go out and measure all 8.5 million trees. They just measured the trees on these plots and scaled those estimates up to represent the whole city. So that's kind of the power of doing a plot-based sample project. When we talk about what is a plot, if you're not familiar with this at all, if you've never done any of this type of work before, within iTree Eco, we're just talking about a circular area on the ground. In our case, we do 1/10 of an acre, so that would be a circle that's 37.2 feet. So you go to where your plot center is on the ground, and you're going to measure all the trees within there. So this example here, you can see these are residential homes. So this plot actually covers multiple different properties. So you have to get permission typically to get on each one of those properties so that you can get into their backyards and measure their trees. So there are some challenges associated with doing one of these plot-based samples. And you can adjust this plot size, typically larger plots. You may need fewer of them, but you're going to measure more trees on each one. So there are some trade-offs between the size and number of plots that you will need. So just kind of how does this shake out? How do you decide between whether you're going to do a sample or a complete inventory? Again, those samples, typically we do them in city or larger areas, or maybe a natural forest where it would be really hard to measure every single tree. We recommend if you're doing a city level project, 200 plots. That's just based on kind of the history of projects that we've seen. That gives you a standard error of around 10% in estimating the number of trees. So that's how we come up with that 200 plots number. It doesn't really matter how big or small your city is. It's really about how variable that is. And cities are highly variable. You'll have some plots that have no trees on them, and you'll have some plots that land in a natural area and might have 100 trees on them. So that high variability means you need more plots. If you're in a natural area where you end up with 30 to 50 trees on every plot, you may need fewer plots. So that 200 recommendation is just based on experience in cities. How many trees are you going to measure? For a complete inventory, you're going to measure all the trees that you're interested in. So we see some people measure all the street trees in their city. So this could be hundreds of thousands of trees in a complete inventory. When you do a plot-based sample, it's just going to be the trees that fall in those plots. For 200 plots, it tends to be somewhere between 500 and 2,000 trees across all 200 of those plots. Those access issues are really not trivial. Trying to get into private property to measure trees can be one of the most time-consuming things of doing a sample-based project. Often when you do a complete inventory project, it's all on public property, or if you're doing something like a college campus, you're going to be all within one sort of ownership. So you won't need permission to get on a whole bunch of different properties. So that's one of the nice things about a complete inventory. As far as accuracy goes, for a sample, you do lose some accuracy because you're just measuring kind of part of that whole community of trees. Whereas in a complete inventory, you're measuring everything you're interested in. So there is none of that sampling error. But finally, the results of a plot-based sample project expand out to the whole city, which can be really nice without you having to measure every single tree. Whereas a complete inventory, your results are only going to be relevant to those trees that you measured. So those are kind of the trade-offs, but really it depends on most of the time what kind of data you have or what kind of data you're willing to collect. So we'll see a little bit more of that as we go through some examples here. But with that, I don't want to just talk about eco. I want to go ahead and jump into an iTree eco project. So we've got sort of our first two key decision points. What data are we going to collect? And are we going to do a plot-based or complete inventory? So I'm going to start with this example here. I have a bunch of street tree data from Rochester, Minnesota. These green dots are each one of their street trees. And I want to go ahead and get this into iTree Eco. So I actually have a spreadsheet of their data here. And you can see what it looks like here. They have a tree ID number. They have a zone. So this is essentially northeast, northwest, southeast, or southwest in that city. And these are the species. We have common names and scientific names. To get your data into iTree Eco, scientific names are normally going to be a little nicer. You can see when we start to do common names, weird things happen. They have things here like Maple, Norway, which might be hard for iTree Eco to interpret. So if you have scientific names, that's great. We have DBH, so we've got at least our species in DBH. That's good. And we have condition. For this example, I'm going to keep it simple and just stick with the species and DBH and tree ID. But anytime you set up a project for iTree Eco, you want to just turn on all the data variables that are going to match the input data that you have or that you're going to collect. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do that in Eco. But first, I want to show you how to get iTree Eco. So iTree Eco is not like the other tools we've covered so far. It's not web-based. You do have to download it and install it, and it's only going to install on a Windows PC. So to get that, I'm on the itreetools.org website. you can just click on download here, and you'll see there's information here about downloading. There's a bunch of information about troubleshooting the download process. And we have a video that will also walk through the process up on the website. But if you just want to get the software, you can just click on this link here where it has the most current version. And it's going to ask you for your email and a little bit of background information. And we will send you a link. So it's going to email you a link to download all of iTree Eco and install it on your machine. There are lots of directions in that email that'll tell you how to do that, the best ways to avoid running into any trouble. And again, we do have a video that walks through that process. And that video is actually linked in the homework. So if you give the homework a try, that first step is to install iTree Eco. So you can give that a look and get started with that. Again, it's going to send you a link. The link is just for one person. So if you have a bunch of people who need iTree Eco, just have each one of them fill out this form. They will each get an email and they can install Eco. This is how we keep track of how many people are downloading. So it is really important that we do this once for each person. And your link will expire eventually, but it doesn't expire for at least 30 days. So you can have that, you can download it, and you can get it installed on your machine. Once it's installed, you can go ahead and start using iTree Eco. So if I was going to use Eco, I think I've got a version of it open here. I would get to it from the start menu, but I'm going to go ahead and start a new project here. And this is our first decision point. So this is whether we're going to do that complete inventory or whether we're going to do a sample. For that Rochester data, it's a list of all of their street trees. It's not those circular plots randomly throughout the city. So we're going to go ahead and select complete inventory from this little drop down instead of plot sample. And I'll go ahead and hit OK. And I'm just going to save this in this folder on my desktop here. And looks like maybe I had that open twice here. So we'll go ahead, and it wants a project name. So this is going to be my Rochester demo. Series name, this is just if we were doing a repeat inventory. Since this is our first one, I'm just going to put a 1 in there. And I know that their street tree data is from 2022. Within iTree Eco, all the time, we're just going to move across these tabs from left to right. And same thing within this tab here for project configuration. So I'm on this project configuration tab, and I'm just entering in this data under project definition. And we'll just move through these tabs. So location, this is where it grabs all that information about the weather, air pollution, everything where we are. So this is in Minnesota, and it's in Olmsted County. And it is Rochester, and the place is usually the city as opposed to the township, which would be a county subdivision. And it automatically fills in my population. You can adjust that. That's the human population. That's going to affect things like the air pollution benefits. So how many people are there to breathe the cleaner air. And from there, our next step is to actually select our weather and pollution data. So I said my data was from 2022, so I'm going to go ahead and use that year. You'll notice here that we only go up to 2023. We don't go to the current year. And that's for a couple reasons. We can't do 2025 because we need a whole calendar year of weather data, and 2025 isn't done yet. And it takes us quite a while to process these data. And it also takes the government quite a while to release these data so that we can actually use them. So typically we're going to be 2 to 3 years behind all the time. So you just have to select a year. Usually I recommend selecting a year that's representative. You don't want a year that's really dry or really wet, or maybe that you had wildfires or something like that that really impacted maybe pollution levels. Those are things that you all want to consider. Maybe you do want to consider one of those years with wildfires because you want to see how much more the trees did when those pollution levels were high. So those are all things to consider, but typically you're going to want to select a year that's usual for the area you're working in. So I'm going to select 2022. And then we have to actually select our weather station. So I'm going to click this select on a map. This takes a minute to load, but it is going to show me my weather stations near my location. So this is our location in Rochester here. And these weather stations are going to be colored based on how complete the data is that we have for that location. So it's loading a whole bunch of data, and it's looking at that full calendar year worth of data. So it's going to take a minute or two for it to load here. But once it does load, it's pretty quick to just figure out which station is closest to you. which one you want to select. Lots of times there will be multiple stations nearby. So you can see Rochester here. We've got this station that's red, so that's poor completeness. This one down here is fair, and we had a 2 within the city of Rochester. So that means we can zoom in a little bit here, and you can see these 2 weather stations close by. And if you click on them, you get a little bit of details about them. Typically, what I look for is whichever one has the highest hourly rainfall. So that hourly rainfall feeds into a lot of the estimates of hydrology benefits and even air pollution benefits. So you want to make sure that you have what's typical for your area. So here we've got about 0.6 meters. And if we click this station down here, well, this is almost up to a whole meter. So we can go ahead and select this station here because it's going to be a little more representative of the actual weather there. Typically, when they're lower and they're nearby each other, it just means that there were some missed measurements in there. So I typically go with whichever one is highest and near to my location where I'm working. And we can actually select different precipitation sources. I'm not going to jump into that because, again, it takes a minute to load here, but we actually have 2 different sources of that precipitation data. So you can select, again, from within that station, which one of those is higher or lower for your exact location. So it just gives you another option to get to precise weather data to run your projects. And finally, we can select our pollution data. So we can auto assign nearby stations, but I'm a little bit of a control freak. So we'll go ahead and actually pick our stations from the map here. So I'm going to click on add stations from the map. And it's going to take a second to load here. But you can see we've got a station here right in the city of Rochester, and it's colored this light blue and this yellowish color. That means it has ozone and PM 2.5. Those are the only 2 pollutants it has. So if I click on that one and add it, you'll see those are the only 2 pollutants in my little table here. So I could go ahead and add another station to see if I can get those other pollutants. None of those stations were super close, so we'll have to zoom out a little bit and see what we can find. And if we're looking for other stations, Minneapolis and St. Paul are up here, and they've got a lot more stations in the cities there. So here's one that has 3 of the pollutants we're missing. So I'm going to go ahead and select this one. And you can actually select multiple stations. If you select multiple stations with the same pollutant, they'll just be averaged over time within your project. So I've got my stations, I've got my weather data selected. So I'm just going to move along these tabs again to my data collection options. And this is that decision point where you have to decide what data you're going to collect. First thing you have to do off the bat is select whether you want English or metric units. This can't be changed once you start your project. So do make sure you get that right. All the time I forget, especially when I'm doing projects for folks overseas, to pick metric, and I have to go back and start over. So you want to take a second with that. Species and DBH, always going to be checked. We can't change those. We need those for our project. And then all these that are blue, those are the recommended fields. Those are the ones that are going to impact those ecosystem services. But you'll see that there's all these other optional fields that you can turn on or turn off, depending on the type of project you're doing. So if you want to map each one of your trees, you can turn on this GPS coordinate. If you want to know whether your trees are public or private, you can turn that on. You'd have to record that for every tree. Since we're bringing in that data from that spreadsheet, I'm just going to stick with what's in the spreadsheet. And we have a user tree ID. And just to keep things simple, I'm going to skip over. They did have crown health, so we could have included that. But I am going to turn on the strata area box. So this allows us to say the total area of our project, which gives us some area-based estimates that can be really useful. And it also makes some of the results come out make a little more sense. So if we don't put in the area at all, things like our percent canopy cover can't be estimated accurately. So I typically turn that on. And since we had a tree ID in that spreadsheet, I'm going to turn that on as well. And we'll hit OK here. I'll get a couple warnings. Since I'm not collecting tree health, it's telling me this is the default value that's going to be used. That's fine by me. I'll also get this table here, which tells me which reports will be available. So I didn't turn on that public or private category there, so I'm not going to be able to get a report about whether those trees are public or private. So this can be nice to review just so you make sure that you're getting the results that you want. So I'll go ahead and hit OK there. And at this point, our project is set up and ready to collect data. So I'm going to jump back over my slides here for a second, just to talk about a couple more decision points that you need to go through. So we've got our project, it's all set up. We can start to get our data in there. But we do have a couple more decisions that we need to make as we work through our iTree Eco project. So one of the key decisions up top is, will you stratify? So stratifying just involves dividing your area of interest into categories. In the case of that Rochester data, they already have it stratified by those regions of the city. So that Northeast, Northwest. So those are just the categories. If that's maybe how they manage their trees, maybe they do maintenance on trees by each one of those quadrants. They'll do Northeast one year, Northwest the next year. That can be a useful way for them to stratify their results. But you can stratify by really any category that is of interest to you in your project. So here's an example of stratifying by land use. So it might be really helpful for you to know how many trees do you have on residential properties versus commercial or industrial properties, or how many trees do you have on public property versus private property, or how many trees do you have in parks versus not parks. So all of these ways can be different ways to stratify. To tease apart your data, you'll get summaries by each one of those categories that you use. So it can be really powerful, especially something like public-private. You can realize that your public trees may account for a lot of your tree canopy cover, but you might have a whole lot of trees on private property. And if you don't do anything to manage those trees or maintain that canopy, you can end up with kind of a drift downward in how much tree canopy you have available. So those categories can be really useful for summarizing your data, for getting really kind of management or even advocacy-based results out of some of those projects that you do. And you can do this before you collect all your data or after. You can do it for a plot-based project or a complete inventory. So there are lots of different ways to kind of slice and dice the data that'll give you results that are really relevant to your community and to the people you're talking to. So stratification, I'm not going to worry about it in that project that we're doing just to keep things simple, but it can be really powerful when you're trying to convey the results of your project to different interested user groups. And the last key decision point that we'll talk about here, and we're going through project setup, is how are you going to get data into your project? So there are really three basic ways to get it in. The first one is what we call manual data entry. So this is collecting data typically on paper, then directly entering it into iTree Eco. So this is much like typing data into a spreadsheet. It can be pretty tedious, but you do have the benefit that you have paper to fall back on, and paper can sometimes be a little more convenient when you're out in the field. But we also have a mobile data entry. So from that iTree Eco project, we can generate a data collection link. We can send that out to everybody that we want to collect data, and they can collect data on their mobile devices. We'll give that a look in a second here. I had a discussion before we did this with Anna. She was a little hesitant about whether we should talk about the mobile data collection or not. I think it can be really useful, but Anna does a lot more work dealing with our support line. So she gets lots of emails from people who are confused by the mobile data and have potentially lost data. So it's really important to note when you collect that data on your mobile device, it's just sitting in the cache of your browser on your mobile device. So you want to send it to the Davy servers at least every day. Typically, I set a limit like maybe every 50 trees or maybe every one plot if you're doing a plot-based project. There's no reason to have it just sit on your phone. If something happens to your phone, if your browser cache gets accidentally cleared, you're going to lose all that data. So we don't want that to happen. And while it's sitting on the Davy servers, it's usually pretty safe, but it's still not yet your data until you pull it back down into your iTree Eco project on your local computer. So I just wanted to double check and reinforce that so we don't get anybody having lost data and emailing Anna or anybody else on the team. It always makes us feel bad when people lose data. So if you do use the mobile data collector, submit it to the Davy servers, pull it down into your project regularly. I would never let it sit on there more than a day or two. And typically I would just pull it down into my project every day so that I'm in control of the data that I've collected. And the last way to get data into iTree Eco is data import. This has really been our kind of fastest growing way to get data in. If you have any data in a spreadsheet that has at least species and DBH, you can get it into an iTree Eco project. If you have plot data that has at least species and DBH, you can now get that into iTree Eco. And it's really quick. The import process, I'm going to walk through here in a second. You can get thousands of trees into iTree Eco, start estimating ecosystem services really quickly. So we've talked about some of our other tools like MyTree. We know that's our most used tool. but the most trees are actually processed in iTree Eco. So we had over 20 million trees processed through iTree Eco last year. And that's because people can import really huge data sets and process 100,000 trees at once, 200,000 trees at once, and get ecosystem services for their whole tree inventory for their city in really short order. So let's go ahead and we'll give that a look in just a second. But if you're trying to make a decision between these, mobile can be really useful if you have a bunch of data collectors, useful for citizen science. If you want to send along that link so that anyone can collect data for your project, it can be really nice to do that. But you do have to remember that you have to have this on a device. You're going to be out in the city, out in the field holding your device. You got to worry about battery life and data connections and all that sort of thing. And it can be really tedious if you're collecting like 50 trees on a plot to type them in on your small phone. Manual, using the paper is really nice because you have a permanent record. And there's relatively few potential issues. I mean, if it rains or something, you're not too worried about your paper getting really wet, but you might be about your phone. And typically, that's going to be done by a single user typing it back into iTree Eco afterwards. So you can actually use the mobile and manual in collaboration here. So you could collect data on paper, but then generate that mobile data collection link and send it around to a bunch of different people to do data entry. So there are some ways to kind of finesse the systems there to get all your data into iTree Eco. And lastly, that import, you've got the most flexibility. If you already have data, you can import it into Eco. If you want to use some other data collection platform, you're familiar with Esri platforms or some of the other free field data collection platforms, you can totally use those to get your data into a spreadsheet and quickly import it into iTree Eco. So all these different ways can be useful depending on what your goals are and what your comfort level is with different technologies. But we'll go ahead and we'll walk through data import really quick here, just so you can see what that looks like with this Rochester project that we've been working on. So I said we wanted to type in, we're still on our project configuration tab here. We did that first step project definition. Now we're going to go ahead, we'll just type the area of the city of Rochester. I said this is pretty useful for estimating some of those area-based outputs. And in our case, we're around 35,000 acres for that city. So I'll go ahead and hit OK there. And now we can move over to our data tab. So before, all these other tabs were grayed out because we hadn't set up our project. But once we finish that, we can now get to our data tab. And we're going to go ahead and we'll click on the trees table. So if I was going to do mobile data entry, this is the table where I would just start typing in my information. But in our case, we'll go ahead and import data. So once I clicked on that trees table, my import button became available. So I can go ahead and import. And I'm just going to grab this data from a spreadsheet. So this is our import wizard. It even links to the video of how to do that down here. So I'm going to go ahead and click next here. And it just wants to know where my spreadsheet is. So again, this was our spreadsheet. I'm not actually going to close this spreadsheet so we can import it now into Eco. So this is my Rochester street trees. And you can see it just pops up with the first worksheet. If I've got multiple worksheets, I can pick different worksheets. It wants to know my first row here. These are my column headers. So I'm going to go ahead and click that box and I'll hit next. And now I'm just mapping up each one of the fields in my input spreadsheet to what iTree Eco expects. So when we set up that project, we turned on that user tree ID field. So that's now available here. So I'm just going to click on user tree ID. My tree ID column is highlighted. So I've got those two columns mapped. We're going to skip zone. That could have been our strata, but we're not doing strata in this project. So we'll skip that. And I'm going to go over to scientific name here. And in my case, this is species. So I've matched my scientific name to my species. That's what iTree Eco needs. And it wants to know what type of field it is. And it can be common name, scientific name, species code. There's a few options there. I'll pick scientific name. And now you can see we've got a few of these red exclamation marks. That means Eco wasn't able to guess exactly how to match that scientific name up to what it has in its database. So in that case, we want to click on this, I need to map my source values. So that'll give us another chance to say exactly which species this needs to be matched up with, which species from our input data it needs to be matched up with what Eco expects. And last column I'll do here real quick is just our DBH. So I clicked on our DBH column and I'm selecting, this is just DBH1. We just have one DBH measured. You can have up to 6 if you have 6 different stems. But in our case, we just have the first one measured here. So we'll go ahead with DBH1. And you can see no red exclamation marks in that column, so we are good to proceed. So you would just want to do this however many fields you have that you're trying to get into eco. You had to turn each one of those on in our data dashboard, and then you would have had to match up each one of those variables here. And we'll go ahead and hit next. This will take a minute as it tries to decide how to match those up. And now you can see, since I said I wanted to match my species column here, we've got a few that we need to correct. The first one here is this is NA. So somewhere in my data, I have some NA values. I have no species values. I know that in my case, that typically means that that tree was dead and they couldn't identify it. In eco, we actually have a sort of general broadleaf tree that we can use for those cases if we think they're broadleaf trees, or we have, if I can remember how to spell, or we have a class for if they're conifers. So it's going to be this Magnoliopsida. That's going to be all our broadleaf hardwoods. And then you can see any of these that are orangish or yellowish, these are the ones where eco made a guess. So this Acer Freemanii was in our data. Eco wanted it to be Acer X Freemanii. That looks like a good match to me. You see most of these are like misspellings in the data we were importing. But we get down here to like this horse chestnut down here, and our eco value is matched incorrectly. So we would just need to click on this and type in how we really want it matched up here. You can see we do have one. Again, this was just a misspelling here over here. This hippocasintum should have been hippocastanum. So we just need to match those up, make sure we get everything right. So if I was doing this for real, I would go through all of these and make sure all my yellows were matched correctly. And then I would go ahead and hit next here. And you can see it tells me that it's able to import all 9,700 of my trees. If there were any records that couldn't be imported, it would tell me here, and they would show up in this rejected tab, and I could go ahead and fix any of those that I needed to and try the import process again. But with that, I'll go ahead and finish here. And just that quickly, we're able to get almost 10,000 trees into iTree Eco. So at this point, we don't have ecosystem services yet. For those, we would need to click on our reports tab here, and you can see all of our reports are grayed out. The way to get those reports is you need to submit your data for processing. I'm not going to go through this whole data submission process because it takes a minute, but it's going to check your data. We didn't have any PM10 pollution stations, so we're not going to get those results. That's all okay by me. And you have to type in your information here. You will get an email once your data has been processed. It depends how long the queue is. If the queue is short, typically takes an hour or two. With people doing really big projects, sometimes it can take up to a day to get your results back. But if I hit OK here, it would send all that data to the server, and I'd have to wait that hour or two to get my results back to download. Once you submit, this track and retrieve results button becomes available. You can click on that. It'll tell you where you are in the queue. If your results are ready, it'll just download them. So you don't need to go anywhere else. All of that can be done within iTree Eco. So that's data import. Again, we don't have time to get to the reports here, but I do want to take 1 minute here to just talk about the mobile data collection. So I do have one other project open here that we can use for mobile data collection. Well, gotta get back to it here. And you're welcome to follow along with this mobile data collection if you'd like. When we do mobile data collection, the way we generate the data collection link is we click on this submit to mobile here, and we can send trees out, and we can just submit our project. And when we submit our project, it's going to generate an email data collection link. So I've already set up this project for mobile data collection. I've already generated that data collection link, and I have it here, whoops, in our PowerPoint slide. So if you want to join, you can scan this QR code, or you can type in this data collection link, and it will open up in a browser, much like this. So this, again, was designed for being on a cell phone. So I'm going to resize mine so it looks a little cell phone sized. And if you want to follow along with this, feel free. So this is like you're one of my data collectors collecting data for my iTree Eco project. And I'm just going to go through this real quick so we can get to Anna too. But it wants to know your surveyor name. So that's who's collecting the data. I'll just put in my initials there. And now we can add trees. I've already got one tree in here. You probably don't have any, so you'll just hit on this plus button to add a tree. And we've got to just go through each one of these options here to enter our tree data. I'll click on general info first. So this is our species. In my case, I've got a white ash that's been protected from emerald ash borer that I'm going to put in here. You can switch between common name and scientific name, but you'll just click on your species. I actually did stratify this project to say whether I was inside the US or outside. So you can just click on whether you're within the US or outside. If you had any comments, you could enter them here. Or if you took a photo of that tree, you could enter the photo number so that you could link those records up later. I'll hit save. And we'll just move down to map coordinates. So I turned on that map coordinates option when I set this up. And this is really what I think is one of the strengths of our mobile data collector is that you can map the location of each one of your trees. I'm in a browser on my desktop, so I'm not going to use my GPS location. But if you click on this little bullseye, it'll zoom right to where you are. So if you're standing under a tree, you can zoom right to that location. For me, I'm doing a tree that's in a park in Lancaster City, where I live here. And I'll zoom out so I can get to this park. Oh, I think I went to different Lancaster, so make sure we're in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And we'll just zoom to this tree. It's on a college campus that's nearby here in this Buchanan Park. And it's this tree right here. So you just zoom to your tree and you can click or tap on it and it fills in the GPS coordinates. You could also use the GPS on your device if you want. You could actually type in those coordinates if you wanted. But all of that is going to be a little less accurate, I think, than actually this tap on the map feature where you can collect the coordinates just by zooming to the tree you're interested in and tapping or clicking on the map. With this forward arrow, so we can move on to our last bit of information we need, and that's our stems. And we have one stem here, so I'm going to hit the plus button to add one stem to this tree. I want to know my diameter. This one's pretty big at 22 inches. So I'll type in 22 and I'll hit save. If I had another stem, I could hit the plus and add that next stem. I don't, so I'll go ahead and hit this back arrow. And I've entered all three of these data points. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And now I have my second tree here. At this point, for this example, I'm just going to go ahead and submit these trees. So I'll click on this gear wheel here. When I submit, it's going to take them from my mobile device, from my browser, and it's going to send them to the Davy servers. So I'll hit submit data here. It's telling me it's going to submit 2 trees. I will hit submit, and it tells me my data has been submitted. So if I close out of there and I go back, see my tree list is empty. So if I jump right back over to my iTree project here, and I'm still on my mobile data window, this time I want to retrieve from mobile. So if I hit retrieve and I type in my password here and show list, this is going to show all the trees that have been entered by people using that data collection link. So my tree that I just entered here, these 2 trees a couple minutes ago are here. If I click on all these, I can retrieve that mobile data into my project. It's off the Davy servers and it's now entered in my project, added to all the other trees that I already have. So I think the mobile data collector is pretty slick, but it is something where you want to make sure you pull that data into your project kind of as quick as possible. So with that, that's kind of as quick as I can demo some of the key features of iTree Eco. And we didn't even get to the results or reports, but I do want to hand it over to Anna with a few minutes left here to talk about some of those results and reports.
Thanks, Jason. All right, does that look okay?
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, great. All right, so yeah, like Jason said, there's a lot that you can get out of iTree Eco because it is asking you to put in a lot, as well as all those flexibilities. And I think really the best way to get familiar with obviously the inputs, but the outputs that you can get out of iTree is going through these example projects that you can pull up under the file and then open example projects. And it'll give you these options to open up projects that have been completed that are either complete inventories of, say, a campus, or using a plot inventory method, so you can kind of see how those projects are set up and the outputs that you'll get out of there. So you can't break anything in these. I open them and explore things in them all the time. So I really encourage you all to use these to help you learn this tool if you decide that it's the right tool for you. And so real briefly, some of the results that you can get out of iTree Eco is these kind of graphs, or I'm sorry, tables and graphs that demonstrate, for example, the species diversity of the trees that are part of your inventory. So you can get a breakdown of your species, either this pie chart or this graph will kind of show the age distribution of your trees. So in this example, you can see that this population has a lot of really young American elm, whereas the older trees tend to be more in this Norway maple. So you're kind of seeing how the population dynamics of your trees as through time might change, which could be really useful for managing your urban forest or forest that you're interested in. And you can also get more breakdown of these tables. So this is an example of the species that are at risk for different pests. So we do have a database of pests that are a threat to trees. That is included in the database, and you'll get some of that information as well. And in terms of, we talked about all that pollution and the precipitation database or data that's included. You can actually see the raw data once you process your project and see, for example, how this is a measure down at the bottom of your air quality improvement by the trees and how that relates to the actual environmental conditions at the time. So really in-depth stuff here that you can get once your project is processed. And we also offer these tables if you include it in air pollution monitors as part of your project, that will show those public health benefits that we've discussed, such as the health outcome in reduction related to these pollutants and the monetary values of those. So through these different kind of health incidents, if you will, for, again, that Rochester street tree improvement. So really just a wealth of information that you can get out of there. Again, really just encourage you to explore those example projects. Oh, sorry. And then finally, I kind of wanted to wrap up today's session as to help you decide if iTree Eco is the right tool for you. So this is the last tool that we're covering of the Academy, and you can see that it is a lot more complex, and really, I learn things about Eco every day, so we're really just scratching the surface. So just some considerations to help you decide if you want to use this tool for your project, or if you're what you're looking for you might be able to get at those things with one of our other tools that are a little more user friendly for you to learn. So as you can see, some of the advantages of using iTree Eco is that you get this super local modeling. So you can use locally available weather and pollution data for where your projects is, which you do get that with other tools, but say, like Jason showed, there might be weather stations that might be a little bit better, or maybe they're a little bit closer to where your project is. Or maybe you want to choose different years. You might, we for the United States, we have up to the year 2023 included, but maybe you want to see what those values were 10 years ago. So you can kind of really customize what data your project or the model is using to produce the results for your project. And iTree Eco is dynamic, so that, as we mentioned, this is our flagship tool. So when there is updates to the science or to the monetary valuations, this is where they're going first, and then they get updated to our other tools. So particularly a lot of researchers and stuff will use this tool for kind of to get access to that new information. But we make this available obviously for everyone through using iTreeEco. And this is also the tool that's can be best suited for a lot of our international users. As we've mentioned, not all of our tools are adapted to use outside of the United States, but this is one that can, if you can contribute, international users can contribute data to make it usable in their home countries. And again, we keep talking about how flexible a lot of these things are with all these different data collection options. So if you already have data, you can get it into Eco really quickly, or we also provide a way, basically a sampling design to do a plot-based project if you're interested in doing a larger scale project, such as a city, or maybe you're looking at a natural area that has a lot of trees. We have a statistically valid way of collecting data from these trees, or collecting data on these trees to be able to extrapolate those results for a larger project area. Yeah, as I mentioned, you also have an option to contribute to improve this model, or this tool, so you can submit new species. So we have Alexis can correct me on this, but I think almost 10,000 or maybe more species already in the database, but obviously there's more, and you can contribute them to be included in iTree data through iTree database, so they can show up in iTreeEco. And you can also contribute new data as it becomes available, and even biomass equations that we have those listed in an appendix, but obviously there's also research around developing these biomass equations. So if you have one or are aware of one, you can share those with us, and they'll get integrated into iTreeEco. And again, we hardly scratch the surface with the results that you can get, but really there's a ton of different reports that you can get out of there. You can group things by, or get reports that are grouped by the species, by the strata, or even individual trees. So really just a wealth of information that can maybe be a little overwhelming, but it gives you different formats for understanding your project and your assessment of the tree population that you're working with. And so yeah, just as an overview of when you might want to use iTreeEco and invest the time to learn this tool. So as I mentioned, if you already have existing data, so if you have an inventory already, or one that can be shared with you or something like that, you can upload it into iTreeEco really pretty easily. Might take a little bit of cleanup of your spreadsheet, but it is a pretty straightforward process. So you can just take that and get that into iTreeEco and get tree benefits. If you have the resources for a larger scale project, so say you don't have a tree inventory, but you would like to have one, and you have access to a lot of volunteers, or maybe just a lot of time to measure a lot of trees, you can, if you can invest that time to get those data, you can get a lot of insights into it with iTreeEco to help support management and policy and things like that. Again, if you're interested in a larger scale project, such as doing a citywide scale, you can follow the plot sampling design, and you'll get again a statistically valid estimate with the standard error and all those things for your project. And yeah, really, if you're interested, again, it's in a more large scale project, this is a really good tool for you as well. Or, I mean, I say large scale, but really it's like, it's more of a project rather than doing a couple minutes on my tree. This is going to get you a lot more information, a lot more insight. So on the other hand, if you might want to try using one of our other tools, and you can get a lot of the same results. As I mentioned, iTree is the engine for those things. So iTreeEco is the engine for these things. So if you use MyTree, you're using the same science that is in Eco. It's just a lot simpler, a lot less choices that you have to make. So those other tools can be really great if you're working with like younger students or the general public who, if you show them a table of, carbon storage and all those things, it would be overwhelming to someone who's not used to looking at those tables. MyTree or OurTrees or any of these tools can offer you a more like user-friendly, easy to digest sort of output. And yeah, this is really great for when you're interested in just showing that trees have benefits, or if you're, just trying to start the conversation of why protecting trees matters, or planting trees and what those benefits associated with those are. And likewise, if you're looking at more, for priority planning, or maybe decisions related to policy, or deciding where to invest your time and resources, tools like maybe iTree Landscape are really powerful for giving you more of a holistic, picture of what you can do with your data that's available for iTree. So I know we're coming up on 1 and at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, sorry. So I am going to share, I had some examples, but we're going to wait to share those for the next week, so you can see how some people are using not just iTree Eco, but maybe where iTree Eco is the best tool, and where other tools can get you those results as well. So I'm going to stop now, but we'll obviously hang on for the next 15 minutes or so. So I know there's some outstanding questions about the nitty gritty of the plots that we can get to.
Thanks, Hannah. That was great. Yeah, I always feel bad. There's so much to cover in eco. It's almost impossible to get to everything that you might need to start, but hopefully we've covered enough that you can start a project, give the homework a try, and you can it'll sort of push you up that learning curve a little bit, and you can start to see if eco is right for you. There are those example projects in eco, and those are a really nice place to start.